Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 4th Annual New Jersey Youth Transitions Conference. My name is April DePietro. I'm the Community Resource Director at the Camden County Care Management Organization. We are thrilled to have you here with us today. We're excited to introduce our wonderful presenter, Toni Scott from DVRS. She will be discussing transition from school to work. Thank you to Toni Scott for sharing your insights and expertise. Let's give a warm welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you guys for having me. This is always a really exciting event. I love coming every year, and thank you guys for inviting me back to speak about DVR. So I know I'm like the last presentation of the day, so you guys are probably ready to hop off. So I'm going to go through everything, and then I'll leave some time open for questions, and I'll also give you guys my contact information. So my name is Toni Scott. I'm a program planning and development specialist with DVR, the Division of Vocational Rehab Services, under the New Jersey Department of Labor and Workforce Development. I specifically oversee all things youth. So that is our pre-employment transition services, which is for our 14 to 21-year-old in-school youth, as well as our out-of-school youth services for anyone 16 to 24 years old. I also assist with our Centers for Independent Living. I'm involved in our inclusive higher education programs, so our college programs. And then I do a little bit of everything else, learning disabilities, autism, some project search. So I'm a little all over the place. If it involves youth, I'm involved. So, all right. Let's see. All right, so I'm going to give you guys background about what DVR is and then some of our specific services for our transition-aged youth. So DVR is the Division of Vocational Rehab Services under Department of Labor and Workforce Development. We help individuals with disabilities to prepare for, obtain, and maintain competitive integrated employment. Our staff are educated master's level counselors who are also specifically trained in the field of vocational rehabilitation. The mission of DVR is to help our consumers to achieve competitive employment outcomes that are consistent with their strengths, their interests, their needs, their abilities, capabilities. Our goal is never to tell a consumer what they have to do, but instead look at what their interests are and help them find a career match that is within those fields of their interests, but also in line with their abilities or limitations that they might have based on their disability. A main focus of DVR that you'll hear me say a couple times is that competitive integrated employment. You might see it abbreviated as CIE. So competitive integrated employment could be a full or part-time opportunity, including self-employment. What makes it competitive is that it is compensated at minimum wage or above and not less than the customary rate paid for an employer for the same work performed by others. So for example, in New Jersey, right now, our minimum wage is $15.13 an hour. But if someone working in the medical field, if it's customary rate for someone maybe as a medical assistant to be receiving $19 an hour, which is above minimum wage, and we do wage and hour checks and we see that that's the customary rate, then that is what we are using. Again, that above minimum wage or customary rate. Also, anyone in competitive integrated employment must be eligible for levels of benefits and opportunities for advancement provided to other employees. So if there's room for growth within a company, maybe starting off as entry level and then transitioning into a supervisory position, or maybe everyone starts off in one area and then after a certain amount of time or successful employee reviews, you move from this entry level position to the next level. And that means our consumers should be held to that same standard as well. And integrated means that the location of work allows employees to interact with other persons with or without disabilities. So again, our focus with DVR is that competitive integrated employment. sometimes our consumers are not ready for competitive integrated employment, and instead they come to us for a referral to a sheltered workshop where they might do piecework that's compensated based on the amount of work that they complete based on a time study. That is not considered competitive integrated employment. DVR can assist with referrals to those sheltered workshops throughout the state, but that is not our focus. Our focus and what's considered successful for our consumers is working, um, earning at least minimum wage or more, and in an environment where their coworkers may be individuals with or without disabilities. So the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, it amended the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. This came out in 2014. It is federally mandated, and all state VR agencies were given until 2016 to make sure that they were abiding by the rules outlined in WIOA. There was a huge emphasis on services for students and youth with disabilities to ensure they have opportunities to receive training and other services to achieve that competitive integrated employment. It also expands the population of students with disabilities who may receive services and the kinds of services that VR agency may provide to youth with disabilities who are transitioning from school to post-secondary education or employment. So basically this is one of the largest changes that VR agencies have seen nationwide in over 30 years. What was pretty exciting was that there was so much focus on services for students and youth with disabilities. Um, this allowed VR agencies to lower the age. So you may have heard in the past, I know there's a lot of people on the call, you may have heard, oh, apply for DVR services 2 years prior to graduation, right? That's what we used to tell schools and students and families. That was a good rule of thumb. However, individuals can apply for services as early as 14. That was the part of the big changes that we saw from WIOA. It also required state VR agencies to reserve a certain amount of our funding, specifically for pre-employment transition services for students that are between the ages of 14 and 21. It also allowed for, instead of just filtering students from a school system into a sheltered workshop doing sub-minimum wage piecework, it required VR agencies to verify that they did in fact provide pre-employment transition services either from the VR agency or transition services from the local school district before a student can just go into the workshop. The big positive with that part of the regulations is it really helps prevent students just going from school into the workshop and then possibly getting stuck there for many years when they could be out there earning competitive wages. So WIOA specifically narrowed down our youth into two different categories, right? So we have our students with disabilities. They are any youth between the ages of 14 to 21 that are currently enrolled in school. The student must be either eligible for special education services or related services under IDEA, Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or individuals with disabilities for the purposes of Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. A lot of words, but basically what that means is that they either have an IEP, they have a 504, or they could be eligible for services under a 504. So maybe the individual has depression and it's not affecting them educationally, so they don't have an IEP. They don't have a 504, but maybe their guidance counselor or school counselor knows that they're being seen by an outside individual therapist for their depression. That would also qualify them for these services here. So you don't have to be known to the school system by having educational deficits and challenges. It simply could be that you could possibly be eligible for having those supports. And last, they must be enrolled in an education setting. This could be middle school or high school because remember, it's based on an age, it's not based on a grade level. So we're looking at, again, services to start at age 14. I had a local office reach out to me recently. They had a student that was 15 years old, but in eighth grade. He was eligible to receive these services because, again, it's based on age, not grade. So they must be enrolled in an education setting, middle school or high school, could be non-traditional or alternative programs, approved private schools for students with disabilities, homeschool, post-secondary programs. So they could be enrolled in college or one of our inclusive higher education programs that we have throughout the state. Enrolled in an education setting through the juvenile justice facility and as well as like adult education programs. So as long as they're enrolled in a school setting, they meet the definition of a student with a disability. So it's like a three-pronged. They have to meet the ages, have the disability, and be enrolled in school. Our next group is our youth with a disability. So that is for our 16 to 24-year-olds who are not currently enrolled in an education program. They could have already accepted a high school diploma. They could have dropped out of high school. It could be that student who accepted that high school diploma and maybe has worked some odd jobs here and there, but really hasn't found their career pathway yet. They would fall into this category of a youth with a disability. All right, so who should be referred to DVR? It could be individuals who have expressed a desire to work in a competitive employment, students who are within the ages of 14 to 21, and are identified in need of pre-employment transition services through the local education agency. That's also known as like the school district here in New Jersey. All right, so we have DVR's role in helping students and youth. So DVR, we work with students to determine the best services to assist in obtaining and maintaining employment in the community. Some examples of how DVR can support the students: we can attend IEP meetings and provide technical consults. So when DVR is invited to an IEP meeting, we should be attending. I say that, but to also say that, with ample notice. So when I was a DVR counselor, sometimes I would be invited like a week or two before to come to the IEP meeting. That it really wasn't feasible when I had a caseload of 100 plus clients, right? I wasn't able to just drop everything and go right to that IEP meeting. However, the school districts, your child study team, they're required per New Jersey Administrative Code to invite anyone that the parent or family asks to be attending that IEP meeting, especially anyone who could be a service provider listed in that IEP. So if you guys, and there are parents, guardians on the call, if you identify and you know that, hey, DVR sounds like something that I want my student involved in sooner rather than later, and you notify the child study team, they should be giving DVR ample notice to attend. And you can request that the meeting not be held unless DVR is present, and then we can work together as a team and come up with a better date. A lot of positives with post-COVID is that, we have that virtual capability now. So, it might be easier to have that DVR counselor join the meeting virtually as opposed to actually coming in person. However, we do encourage that. DVR can also be present at any person-centered planning meetings. I was a counselor for 8.5 years, and I always wanted to be invited to one, and I never was. I know that there's a huge push now through Office of Special Education for person-centered planning meetings. I know that there are lots of webinars and trainings that I see coming out throughout the state from all different agencies about the PCAST and all of those great things. So, if DVR is invited, we certainly should be a part of those meetings as well. DVR also networks with other local agencies to help develop work opportunities. So we could be working with our local one-stop career centers, our workforce development boards, other other contacts that we have within the community, could be our centers for independent living, to try to develop any opportunities for employment, but also for different internships as well. We also help evaluate an individual's interests and strengths to provide and make suggestions about career roadmaps and appropriate career pathways. I know there are certain questions on the IEP that do ask. You're supposed to ask specifically the student to answer the questions when we get to that transition section of an IEP. And sometimes we see things on there that, yes, it's the student's interest, but is it achievable for that student, or is it the reality for that student? Um, as child study team case managers, oftentimes, you write down what the student says. If the student says they want to be an influencer or a YouTuber or a race car driver, right? You guys have to write that down, and that's what you put on there. And when they come to DVR, sometimes we see that, and we might look at their limitations and restrictions that they could have medically. We look at maybe where their levels are in terms of like educationally, maybe what reading level they're at, their math skills. And we look at that goal, and part of what our role is to really help a student understand the reality of those goals that are on there. Oftentimes, DVR is called the dream killers, right? Because sometimes we have to be that hard kind of, this isn't the reality. Like, we can't support you for this goal. I would always try to say to my students, that's great that you have an interest in doing this, and maybe we can find you a volunteer opportunity or a way to still be involved in that. But in terms of a career and a way that you're going to earn money, let's look at some of your other strengths, or maybe how can we take your interests in this field of video game designer or race car driver, or some of the other things that we see on there. How can we take your interests and your strengths and relate it to a career that is in demand within our area and is achievable based on their needs? DVR also assists with providing information on post-secondary education programs. So DVR currently supports several of our comprehensive transition programs across the state, as well as some programs at our local community colleges. We are continuing to expand these programs as they grow across the state. We also help with traditional college programs for matriculated students as well. And then we have job search assistance. That could be helping someone look for a job, creating a resume, practicing interviewing skills. Some offices do job clubs where they have a group of clients come in, and we used to do one in the office I came from where we would pull out like interview questions and practice answering interviewing questions. And clients really enjoyed that because they learned from one another, and maybe they had a set way on the way that they always answered a question. But then they heard another client answer it a different way and would kind of share ideas. So there's a whole plethora of things that we do in terms of job search. Again, because DVR's goal is employment, so everything we do has to relate to work. So the pre-employment transition services, these are for our 14 to 21 in-school youth with disabilities. WIOA requires state VR agencies to offer these 5 services. We are required to offer them statewide to any student who may need these services. So they are, and I'm going to go into detail about each one of these. We have job exploration counseling, work-based learning experiences, counseling on post-secondary education programs and enrollment into those programs, workplace readiness training, and instruction in self-advocacy. So job exploration counseling, these are just some examples of what might fall under that category. Think of it as exploring careers. It could be taking interest inventories about likes and dislikes, exploring what careers are in demand within the state of New Jersey. The last thing I would want to do is to, guide a student to become like a marine biologist, and that's like not something in demand in our area, right? Maybe if we lived in like Florida, that would be something in demand, but in New Jersey, it's really not. So, really looking at what's in demand in New Jersey, we use tools like New Jersey 10. Our staff also use ONET, which gives a lot of really cool information about every career, and there's videos on there and informational interviewing and things like that. So anything that we do that in terms of like exploring careers and what those pathways are, that could fall into job exploration counseling. Another area that's really big is our work-based learning experiences. If there's any school staff on the call, used to be called like structured learning, kind of change the lingo a little bit to be work-based learning. This could be in school or after school. It could be a paid or an unpaid experience, internship, job shadow, volunteering, apprenticeship, a workplace tour. It's think of it as like that hands-on piece. Everything else can be done in like a classroom setting, but the work-based learning is really out in the community, hands-on, exploring what careers are. Next one is counseling on enrollment. So this is enrollment into a post-secondary education program, so our college programs. We explore information about colleges, the academic process, financial options, so assist with the financial aid applications, applying for scholarships or loans, sharing information about the disability coordinator or disability services. Each college calls it a little something different. So, teaching the student how to and who to contact to disclose their disability to try to get accommodations in the college setting. Helping students create a roadmap for, again, career counseling and making sure that if they have a very specific interest that they're maybe applying to a college that specializes in that. For example, I'll just give like TCNJ used to be known as like the teacher's college, right? Anyone I ever knew that was a teacher, 9 times out of 10 went to TCNJ. So if I had a youth that said they were interested in being a teacher, that would be a college I would assist them in exploring just because they're known to be that college in the state. Types of academic and educational training needed to succeed in a workplace. So if through job exploration counseling, it's determined that somebody has an interest in maybe being a vet tech, right? Well, they're going to need some type of college or training to work in that field. So once we do job exploration counseling, maybe the next step is to do counseling on enrollment and explore college programs that could be appropriate for the student to have as their next step. Another area is the workplace readiness training. So I always try to say, like, think of this as like the soft skills that someone needs for a job, right? So you're going to build the students' social and independent living skills necessary for employment. So it could be communication and interpersonal skills. It's not so much practicing interviewing skills, but how you would behave on an interview, right? Like shaking someone's hand, eye contact, how you sit in a seat, maybe the dressing for success, the type of clothing that you wear, financial literacy. So understanding when you get that paycheck, what do you do with it? I don't even know. Do they even teach in high school how to write a check? I don't even know if that's something that they still do anymore, right? But like, how to do that, how to deposit the check into your bank account, how to manage finances. We teach them about how to look for work. It's not it's all about the teaching and the exploring. So it's not actually sitting with a student and looking for employment and applying for jobs. That's not it. It's about how to do that. What websites do you go to? Do you have a resume? How do you create a resume? What about references? Right? Like, who do you even give as a reference? What do you put for that? Right? With everything being digital and, in the world we have, right? Like understanding the legitimacy of websites when they're applying for jobs. And is it a legitimate site like Indeed? Or are they applying for a job on Craigslist, right? Like how trustworthy is it that they're doing? If they're filling out an online application, is it a trusted website where they can put their social in? Or is it not, right? So like teaching them about that. It's not sitting and helping them fill out the application. It might be filling out like a template or a fake application to teach them those skills. Uh, Another one I think it's important to talk about is like understanding employer expectations for punctuality and performance. One of the big things I would talk to a lot of my students about was, when you get that job, like, how do you know what happens with your lunch break, right? Like in high school, you know that, all right, third period, fourth period, fifth period, you have lunch, right? Well, what happens when you're working? When do you get a break? When do you have lunch? Is there a fridge for you to put your lunch in, right? Or do you have to bring an extra bag? Do you only get 15 minutes and there's nowhere close enough to walk to? So do you have to bring something with you? Teaching them um, to ask these things and know these are questions to ask because it's not like school. No one's going to give you a schedule in a sense of telling you where to be and what to do. And then how do you know when to return from your break, right? So could be showing them, hey, listen, you get 15 minutes. Let's set a 15-minute timer on your cell phone, right? So or a 14-minute timer. So once that timer goes off, you got to be back in your workstation. You have a minute to get back there. And then any other soft skills that might be needed for employment. The last one is instruction and self-advocacy. You'll see that a lot of the areas I'm talking about right now, they all kind of overlap. So some of the things I talked about in college, right, like about connecting with the Disability Service Center or Disability Resources. Each college, again, calls it a little something different. So when we're teaching a student who to connect with, that's self-advocacy. When we're teaching a student about financial literacy or how to ask their boss about break times, right? Again, you're going to use self advocacy skills to complete some of these other areas. So a lot of them really do overlap, which I think is pretty cool because the students are getting with the exception of work-based learning, because again, that's going to be your hands-on experience, but a lot of the other areas really do overlap. So in one meeting with a youth, you can have an hour-long meeting and cover 3 out of the 5 areas in that one meeting just by having a conversation and looking some stuff up online. So instruction and self-advocacy, again, it's learning about an individual's disability and how it might impact them um, in work or in college. Understanding their rights and responsibilities as an individual with disability, teaching them how to disclose when it's appropriate and how to appropriately disclose their disability, how to request accommodations, services, and supports. With DVR, we have to ensure that our employers are providing what's called a reasonable accommodation, right? So, a reasonable accommodation would be maybe if I had a physical disability and I had a standing restriction. So maybe I was only medically cleared to stand for, I needed like to sit every 15 minutes, every 2 hours, I needed to sit for 15 minutes, right? So a reasonable accommodation would be maybe a stool. I would be able to have a stool if I was working at a register. Or if I was working in an office setting, a reasonable accommodation would be one of those like stand sit desks, right, where the desk can go up so I can change between a standing and a sitting position. What is not a reasonable accommodation is expecting a business to change their hours for childcare. That is not a reasonable accommodation, right? So, teaching our youth what is reasonable and what's not so they can advocate for themselves. I would have young adults come to me all the time in the field office and say, well, I was working at A, B, and C employer and I got fired. They shouldn't have fired me though. It was against the law. And I would say, well, what happened? And they would start explaining it to me. And they were like, I had a disability. They couldn't fire me. Well, that turned into a whole self advocacy lesson, right? So they didn't fire you because of your disability, but you were showing up late every day. Like, to, again, kind of teaching, making it into a teachable moment. But then also, if we do feel as though someone may have been discriminated against or um, terminated from employment, we do have resources through the EEOC, as well as other sources to, help our consumers if we feel as though that they were wrongfully terminated, or maybe a reasonable accommodation was requested and not provided. Sometimes it's about we have a business outreach team at DVR, and sometimes it's about our business outreach team providing employers with education about employing and working with individuals with disabilities. Sometimes it's not intentional, and the employer themselves needs some education, and we have a whole unit to do that. Another thing for self advocacy is peer mentoring, um, which I don't see a lot of. I'd love to see that area grow. So if you have any youth that you're working with that would be interested in that, I'd love to see that grow through DVR. It's not a huge area that we see that often right now. All right, so the referral for pre-employment transition services, it is located on the DVR website. And being referred to DVR is the first step in services. Typically, it's school staff who make the referral to DVR. However, students themselves or their parents and guardians can also make that referral. We encourage you to go through the school staff to make that referral because we're going to end up needing to connect with the school staff, right? Like when you say you have your child study team, right? Your child study team case manager, it's a team of people who come together to help, and we're just another part of that team. So again, we get a lot of information when we connect with the school. So it is important that we have the school's involvement in the referral process. Uh, it's also important to note that the referral is not an application for services. A lot of times people think, well, I filled out the referral online. So, I'm good. I'm going to get services. It's not. The referral is just like a letter of interest, kind of. It gives us basic information so we know how to connect with you and to get you in our system, but we still need to do an intake. It is a shorter process for our students with disabilities, but it is still a step in the process. Another thing that I wanted to add is that DVR cannot duplicate any services that the school is already providing. So, of those pre employment transition services, the 5 that I talked about, if any are being provided from the school, we can't come in and replace or duplicate those services. So that's another reason why it's important for us to be in contact with the child study team, to get copies of that IEP to see what transition services are already being provided by the school or what might be available through the school so we can work in collaboration with the school. It's not a finger pointing. It's not, well, this is your responsibility. This is our responsibility. It's not supposed to work like that. We're supposed to work as a team to really come together and collaborate for that student and to ensure that they have a nice transition from high school into whatever the adult world of what comes next for them might look like, whether it's college or employment. So the documentation that we need for pre-employment transition services, the counselor could request from the child study team case manager or from parents, maybe a copy of the student's most recent evaluations and their IEP. Any medical evaluations, we want to ensure that, if there are any restrictions or someone that has like any medical restrictions, we want to make sure that we're not going to put anyone into an environment that might cause them harm. So we want to know if there are any, physical limitations or any restrictions that the student might have from a medical professional. Also, if there are any assessments about the student's social skills, any behavioral or safety issues, that's good for us to know again because we don't want to put a student in an environment that they could cause harm to themselves or to others. It's really about the safety It's not about us determining is that student appropriate for services. It's about making sure that, we tailor our services to the need of that individual. Okay, so the transition from our pre-employment transition services to our vocational rehab services. So WIOA, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, um, required state agencies to have two types of services. So we have our services just for our youth. So those 5 core pre-employment transition services I talked about are just available to our youth. They are not available to any other clients that we serve. It's only for our 14 to 24-year-olds, specifically our 14 to 21 high school students, right? Um, However, DVR has a whole another set of services that we can provide to any consumer as early as 14, but there's also no age limit on it either. The oldest client I ever had, I want to say was like 82 years old, and he wanted to work and he came to DVR for hearing aids. He needed support in buying hearing aids so he could maintain employment. So anything outside of those 5 services, the process is listed below. All right, so we have the referral process. Again, that referral is not the application, it's just that initial contact with our agency, letting us know you're interested in hearing more about services, figuring out if we're appropriate for you, or even, sometimes we get clients that say, I don't know why I was told to fill out the referral, so I did. And sometimes it's us sitting down and figuring out what their needs are. We have an application that we need to complete, followed by an eligibility determination. We are federally mandated to determine eligibility within 60 days of having that application. We have been tracking it, and it has been a lot less than 60 days, and we're pretty proud of that because pre-COVID it was way past the 60 days. So we've gotten it down. So our agency is very proud of that. In eligibility determination, we are requesting medical records. We are looking at what limitations someone might have, any restrictions that their doctor has on them, and we also need to determine that they're medically cleared for employment. Following that, we might do some work evaluations. We're figuring out what services an individual needs, kind of developing the plan. And that plan is called an individual plan for employment, or the IPE. So for students in high school, some of them may have an IEP, an individual education program. For us, they have an employment plan. So schools focused on education, DVR is focused on employment. And then the last step would be that successful rehabilitation. So once we've provided the services that are listed in that plan that lead to an individual obtaining and maintaining employment for at least 90 days or more, then they're considered a successful rehabilitation, and we can proceed with closing a case. I say that to say that we are not like a one and done agency. So if an individual loses that position or needs to resign from that job, they can always come back and reapply for DVR services, and we can, look for other employment or provide other services that are needed. So you don't have to tell my clients, like, don't feel like you have to stay at this position forever. If you need to change it or your goals change or your needs change, you can always come back to us and we're here to help. So the referral, again, it really can be made by anyone, schools, doctors, mental health providers, parents, friends, literally anyone can make the referral to DVR. Both referrals are on our website. So there is a referral called the confidential referral, and then right under that is the pre-ET student referral. If the consumer you're referring over meets that 14 to 21 and they are in school, please do the student referral. It's a quicker process. It's a lot less information that we need. And the schools within the county are divided up amongst the counselors in the office. So if they see the school that your student attends, you will be assigned directly to that counselor who is familiar with the child study team case managers, who has an understanding of what transition services that high school offers. So you'll be assigned to that point of contact from DVR. If you do the confidential referral form, it might sit in limbo a little bit. It might bounce between a couple people until it makes its way to that assigned counselor once it's figured out that this is a student, right? Because it doesn't indicate that on the referral. So please make sure that you guys fill out that student referral on our website. Next would be the application for services. I'm not going to bore you guys with all the stuff that's on here, but I always tell my clients, try to come to that intake appointment with any information that you think would be helpful, right? The more information I have in the beginning, the better I'm able to make referrals over to know which direction we're going in. Sometimes we can send like medical release forms or even provide that medical clearance form prior to the intake appointment. So when I would have clients say, well, I have an appointment with my doctor next week, I'll say, great, I'm going to mail you the form, have your doctor fill this out. So instead of us waiting on that back and forth between DVR and the doctor's office and medical records or whoever, they can just take that letter right to the doctor themselves. We do also encourage releases of information to be signed for anyone that could be communicating regarding services and about the case. That just, again, is another way to help us ensure that we're not doing a disservice to the consumer by not communicating with whoever might be involved in their team. And that could certainly looks different for each individual, whether it's a student or an adult. I talked a little bit about eligibility and how we need to, we're requesting records, we're looking at disability documentation. We're trying to see what vocational rehab services are needed to help prepare for secure, maintain, or re-engage in employment. I talked a little bit about the individual plan for employment already. So it's a written agreement between the counselor and the consumer. And we are outlining the services that are needed to reach that individual's employment goal. And again, DVR is not supposed to tell you what that employment goal is. It's supposed to be mutually agreed upon. So, if an individual is like insistent upon a goal, an employment goal, that maybe goes against their medical restrictions that they have, or they're insistent upon a goal that it might require years of higher level education, and they are reading at a fourth grade level and their math is at like a sixth grade level, right? If it's something that might not be achievable, we can help provide them with guidance and tools, show them, what they would need to obtain and maintain employment in that field. And hopefully maybe be able to agree upon a different employment goal. Again, it's not our job to tell them what they have to have as that employment goal, but to agree on a goal together. Some of the DVR services that we can provide could be vocational assessments. So if somebody maybe had an injury on a job and they could no longer return to that field of work. So maybe they were an auto mechanic and had some kind of back injury or a hand injury, and they couldn't go back to doing that kind of work anymore, or maybe the restrictions that they had, they weren't able to return to that work. We might do some vocational assessments to figure out what else are they interested in, what else could they do. Job development is everything preparing for that job. Supported employment services. So once someone is ready for employment, pre-placement is everything prior to them getting a job. So it could be practicing interviewing skills, creating a resume, going on interviews, applying for jobs. Job coaching is a service that our agency provides. You can't, if you're familiar with job coaching and you've had job coaching, or your student has had job coaching while they've been in high school, and you're like, hey, X, Y, and Z agency was fantastic. They worked with them while they were in high school for several years. We want our student to, they've exited high school, but we want our student to work with them. You can't walk into that agency and say, hey, we want to pay out of pocket for this job coach, right? They're going to say, you have to go to DVR or DDD. DDD is probably going to send you to us first. So just come to us first, and we'll figure out what we need to do. But our agency does provide job coaching to help someone learn skills and techniques in order to do that job as independently as possible. We also have support for assistive technology and auxiliary aids. So that could be communication devices such as screen readers, large print, braille, hearing aids, or assistive technology to successfully work on a job. We do also have funding for college and post-secondary training, tools and equipment that might be needed for a job. And we have time-limited funding for physical therapy, individual mental health therapy, things like that. And the last step is successful rehabilitation. So that is once someone is successfully working for at least 90 days or more, we discuss a successful case closure. It's the start of that 90 days is the date of the last service provided. So say someone is working and we're providing when that job coaching support, they got job coaching for 2 months. We might not start that 90-day clock until the last day that they receive job coaching. So it usually ends up being well over 90 days before we even are discussing successfully closing a case. And the last bullet I have on there is that consumers can reapply for any services in the future if their job situation changes. These are just, I am going to share the PowerPoint. So these are just some resource links that you guys can have access to as well. And I did talk about some of our specific PREETS specialty services that we have. Project Search, I know that they presented earlier this morning, so you got to hear from 2 of my colleagues from DVR, Solo and Renee. They're the Project Search experts, so I told them I was going to give them a little plug this afternoon. Drivability, we get a ton of questions about driver's training, behind the wheel driver's training. We are currently piloting a program through one of our centers for independent living in Mercer County, Progressive Center for Independent Living. Hopefully, if all continues to go well, which we've having some success right now, we'll see this mirrored throughout the state. So it's a pre-drivers program and through a driving simulator and everything to, get the driver's permit, to behind the wheel driving, to all of that great stuff. We also have, we did it this summer for the first time through TCNJ, a pre-college summer program, which was a college prep for anyone who might be interested in college. It was a residential program for 10 days, which was pretty exciting. We're hoping to expand that as well. So I just wanted to kind of highlight a couple of our PREETS specific programs. We have so many more. We have over 42 providers across the state that serve every single county. We have paid internship opportunities. So we really are continuing to expand and grow our PREETS and youth services throughout the state. And here is my contact information. Renee, who did speak earlier today, if you were on that Project Search call, Renee splits her time between Project Search, benefits counseling, and PREETS. So she helps me out a lot. So her and I both, are the youth and PREETS contacts. And that is, I was trying to stay on track of time, give some time left for questions. I saw a bunch of questions coming through the chat as I was going, but that is the end of the PowerPoint that I had. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. April, I'm not sure if
Yes.
you read them, open it up, however you want to go. I'm on board.
Absolutely. All right. So one of the first ones I see here is after a school district makes a referral to DVRS, how do we receive contact info for a DVRS representative that we can invite to a student's IEP meeting?
Great question. So the school district should be aware of the DVR counselor assigned to their school, right? So there are 18 offices across the state that serve all 21 counties. Um, Salem and Cumberland share an office in Bridgeton, and Morris, I'm
Sussex
gonna is I think it's Morris
or
Sussex. Yeah,
Sussex?
they share the Randolph office, but every other county has their. Oh no, wait, Hunterdon and Somerville, they share an office in Somerville. Yeah, yeah, something like that. But we have an office in every
Those
county,
northern
right?
counties, yes. Is
Yeah,
that listed anywhere on the website?
it is. It is.
Okay,
It's
excellent.
broken down by county, and then the contact information.
Okay,
Anyone can reach out to their DVR office and see, hey, I'm calling. My child goes to Hamilton West High School, who's the DVR counselor assigned to that school. They
okay,
should be able to let you know that. There's also a lead transition counselor in each DVR office. So that's like the mini me kind of in the field. They are the point of contact in their office for all things transition.
mhm,
So you can also ask for the lead transition counselor and they can ensure you're getting connected to the right staff.
excellent. Would DVRS be able to support an individual if they do not have a high school diploma or GED? Also, if the individual is out of school, who would do the referral to DVRS?
Um, so we would be able to support someone that does have a high school diploma and is not enrolled in school. If they are 24 and under, they would fall into our out of school youth range. That would be the confidential referral that is on the website, not the student referral because they're
Okay,
not in school anymore.
okay,
And again, anyone can make that referral. It could be a parent or guardian, um, a doctor, someone from a treatment team.
mhm,
Just know that when we make that phone call or we send that letter or send that email, we're going to be reaching out to the client's name who's put on there, right? So certainly make sure that if it's not the individual themselves filling it out, and it might be mom or dad or aunt or uncle or someone, that they're aware. Because I can't tell you how many times we would call clients and say, "Hey, I got a referral here for Richard," and they'd be like, "I don't know who you are, don't know why you're calling, not interested." So, please make sure that if you are making the referral on behalf of someone, you're either making sure your contact information is on there or that the person's aware of why we're calling.
excellent. And if the individual is over 24 and does not have a high school diploma, can they access services?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
How long is usually the wait time to hear back from DVRS and to get someone to come out for vocational assessments?
So once we receive a referral, each office varies slightly. Once we receive the referral, there should be like a 2-week turnaround. So within a 2-week period of time, some type of contact is supposed to be made from that DVR counselor,
Okay.
whether it's a phone call, an email, a letter, something is supposed to be made. In terms of doing vocational assessments, that's an evaluation that varies again depending on the provider's wait time. It depends on, is this individual still in school? Are they not in school? Again, because sometimes the assessment could be something that the high school could be doing as opposed to DVR. So that's not an easy answer for me to give. It would be more specific to that person's situation.
Okay. Would pre-ETS be available if school provides only limited services? For example, does job training of 2 to 4 hours weekly satisfy job training?
So yes, we work again with the school and we complement the services that they are already providing. If job training, if you mean like work-based learning, where they're going out onto a job site and maybe the school's only offering 2 to 4 hours um, under work-based learning, we wouldn't come in and offer another 2 to 4 hours in the same industry, right? Because again, we're duplicating the same exact services the school's providing. But if we were able to maybe obtain a paid experience, well, the school's not offering paid. So that would be us kind of complementing something that the school is already providing. So we really do have to look at, and sometimes parents come to us and they say, well, I don't like the site that the school found for my student. I
Mhm.
want them to come through you guys. The schools, you need to discuss that with the school and tell them why you need to find a different site. It's not, oh, we're going to come through you to get the services now. if the school's offering it and can provide it, we can't come in and duplicate it. But again, we work together as a team to, collaborate and see what we can do together.
Okay. My youth was approved for DVRS at 19 years old while attending school. She just turned 21 and is no longer in school. Does she need to submit a new referral for your non-pre-employment transition services, or would she stay with the same DVRS counselor?
Oh, great question. She should stay with the same DVR counselor. We had a lot of new hiring over the last several months, which is great for us because we had a lot of retirements and moving of positions over the last couple of years, and we finally were able to backfill a lot of those positions. So a lot of the offices that were really short-staffed have grown their teams. So there could be a chance where it is given to another counselor, but that might only be because they're kind of like evening out the caseload sizes now, right? So you certainly can request to stay with a specific counselor if there was a good rapport that was built before, and whatever the reason might be.
Thank you. It says I missed part of that. Are the consumers supposed to have a copy of the IEP? How do they find out the goal of the IEP and the plan to get there? Asking as a parent and peer provider to teach self-advocacy and follow-up skills for families.
Great. So the IEP that's provided through the school, right? That's what we're talking about?
I believe so, yes.
So, okay. So that should be provided to, a copy should be provided to the parent or guardian, could be provided to the student, depending on the student's age. If they are 18, should be provided to the student if they are their own legal guardian. It could be requested from the child study team. So, we encourage and we hope that when clients are coming to us, they do have a copy of that. If they don't, or maybe they change districts or something might be older, we certainly can have them sign release forms and we can request that.
Okay. Rather than all evaluations, can we send the eligibility that includes all the information in the individual's reports?
Yes. So sometimes in the IEP, in the beginning part of the IEP, we'll see them reference like psychological and it'll give like a couple paragraphs, like a summary, or like education and then gives a couple summary paragraphs. That's fine as long as what's referenced in there isn't too outdated.
Okay.
So as long as what's referenced in there is the most recent evaluations, that's fine. You can send that IEP.
Okay. How is the funding for college and trade schools determined?
Funding for college and trade school, it is based on a financial needs assessment that is done for any of our VR services. The financial needs assessment is based on the family size and the total income in the household based on family size. There are situations when someone receives Social Security benefits or supplemental security income that there are services that are covered by that. Again, that's a case-by-case basis situation that should be talked about with the DVR counselor. But yes, we do have funding. All of those VR services that I had mentioned on the later part of the presentation, they are all subject to a financial needs assessment, which means that, DVR has to be the last source payee. So if financial aid can be paid or something can be purchased by an employer or a medical provider or a school, they purchase first and then DVR can look at coming in to kind of support those services.
So like last dollar in. Okay.
Yes.
DVRS and DDD, how do they work together with funding a program if a student is over 21?
So DDD will also say that they are a last source funder. So it's always a very interesting conversation that we have to have. But it's really looking at if they are already working with DDD or starting that process, it's looking at what parts of the services or programs can typically be covered through like the waivers and things like that through DDD, and what portions are not allowed to be covered. So when we look at our college programs, right, like our inclusive higher ed programs, portions of that typically are covered by DDD and could be covered by DVR. So we oftentimes have to like braid and blend funding to hopefully make it as minimal, if not as lowest cost on the family and individual as possible to try to use our funding together. But again, that's why it's important to allow for that open communication between our agencies. So we're ensuring that, things can be covered and it's the lowest cost possible on the family.
Okay. Someone said that they are new to this transition coordinator role and they get confused by DVRS and DDD. How do you know who to refer to what, or do we always start with DVRS and go from there, or do you guys work together? Sorry, just overwhelming. I wish there was a checklist and roadmap to follow.
Oh, I actually love that suggestion. Thank you very much. There's a couple big grants that New Jersey has for transition services, so I will certainly make this suggestion to one of my colleagues over at Department of Ed for our team. I love that idea. So you can refer to both. Sometimes it's based on age and it's based on level of need. So if you think that the individual is appropriate for that competitive integrated employment that I described and employment is in their kind of pathway, right, or in their roadmap, it would be a DVR. We just help with the employment supports. If someone needs all other supports, personal aids and services, transportation, day hab, respite care for parents, medical, like all of that, that's all DDD stuff, right? So we just handle the employment piece. DDD does have some services for employment, but certainly not anywhere near what we have. So I know it's not an easy answer, but if you're looking at those students who might be on your caseload that really have those significant disabilities and have those medical needs and maybe employment or independently having a job or going out to work or getting to work isn't in the cards, or maybe you're not really sure, then it might be more DDD than it is DVR, but you certainly can refer to both of us.
Okay. Does the consumer have to have a social security number?
To participate in pre-employment transition services, no. So if they meet the definition of a student with a disability, they're between 14 and 21, have a disability, and enrolled in school, they do not have to have a social security number.
Okay.
Once they exit school, accept a high school diploma, hit age 22, once they're kind of outside of that definition, if they want VR services, they have to have a diploma. They have to have a social security number.
Okay. Miss Sarah, are you still with us? Because I believe I did a poor job of articulating your question and I want you to have the opportunity to ask it properly. So if you want to come off of mute, you're welcome to ask Toni directly. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I didn't want to interrupt. So I was actually asking about the IPE that DVR makes, not the IEP. So are consumers allowed to know the goal and what the IPE is? Because I thought you said that they weren't, and I don't know if I misheard you. That's my question.
I saw that I had like an unstable internet connection as I was kind of like talking about that, and then I saw your question come through, so I was wondering like what part I cut out on. Thank you so much for asking that and clarifying that. So absolutely, the individual should know what their employment goal is on their individual plan for employment, right? They have to sign it. They have to agree to it.
Okay.
Anybody who is like a representative or a support person for them also has to sign it and agree to it. So they should be in agreement with all things developed in that plan. The counselor should not just say to them, boom, here's your plan, sign it, let's go, right? They should be agreeing and understanding what services are in there, how those services are measured, how we're determining because the individual's responsibilities are listed in that plan too. And just as much as the individuals holding us accountable to helping them reach that goal, we have to hold them accountable to their part as well. So, it should be talked about. We should be going through line by line, and it should be agreed upon and signed by all parties.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that dyslexia will get you every time. Another question came in. Can you repeat the age that you may start the DVRS application?
14.
14. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. All right. Well, that was awesome. Thank you, Tony Scott. We truly appreciate your time and your expertise. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us and for being a part of this discussion. We hope that you learned something valuable and feel inspired on your own hero's journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.